Red Dead Redemption 2 truly represents a milestone in the gaming industry. And when we talk about what makes this title special, we need to dissect every element that contributes to its greatness. Rockstar Games managed to create something that transcends the traditional concept of an electronic game, transforming the experience into something closer to an interactive cinematic work where every decision, every moment of contemplation, and every interaction contributes to a memorable journey. The story of Arthur Morgan is not simply another generic Western vengeance or redemption plot. What makes the narrative of Red Dead 2 exceptional is the way it delves into the nuances of morality, loyalty, and the end of an era, putting you at the center of devastating internal conflicts that have no easy answers. The van der Linde gang functions as a dysfunctional family, where each character has their own personality, motivations, and arcs that organically intertwine with the protagonist's journey, making you genuinely care about the fate of each one of them. Unlike other games that treat NPCs as mere accessories, here you feel like you are living alongside real people, with their virtues and flaws, and this creates an emotional connection that few titles manage to achieve. The level of immersion that Red Dead Redemption 2 offers is something that borders on obsession with details. Every aspect of the world was built to make you feel part of that late 19th century universe, from the footprints your horse leaves in the snow to the way your clothes partially get wet when you enter the water. Rockstar didn't just create beautiful scenery for you to run through to the next mission, but a living ecosystem where each town has its own identity, animals behave realistically, and even the camp NPCs follow daily routines that make the world seem to breathe. This attention to detail transforms simple travel into moments of contemplation, where you can get lost observing a sunset in the desert or watching a storm forming on the horizon, creating memories that are etched long after you turn off the console. One of Rockstar's main goals was to make players feel like they were inhabiting that world, not just consuming missions and cutscenes. The gang's camp system perfectly exemplifies this philosophy, allowing you to interact with other characters naturally, hear organic conversations, and participate in everyday moments that do not advance the main plot, but absurdly enrich the experience. You can fish, hunt, play cards, search for hidden treasures, deliver letters, buy supplies, and perform an infinity of activities that reflect the life of that era. And all these mechanics work together to create a sense of belonging that is extremely rare in the world of games. It's not about completing a to-do list, but about living in that universe and letting it transform you in the process. Here we come to the point that divides opinions and needs to be addressed honestly. Red Dead Redemption 2 is deliberately slow. While modern games and even other Rockstar titles like GTA encourage you to cause chaos and rapidly advance between objectives, Red Dead 2 demands patience and contemplation, asking you to slow down and absorb every moment of Arthur Morgan's journey with all its highs and lows. This narrative and design choice makes total sense within the game's proposal, but it poses an obstacle for players who have been conditioned by the frantic pace of social media, where 15-second content dominates attention, and anything longer needs to be constantly stimulating to maintain interest. If you are the type of person who can't watch a movie without picking up your phone, you will probably find the game's long horseback rides and contemplative moments of silence to be tiring instead of relaxing. There is a valid discussion about how the current generation of players, accustomed to instant gratification and a constant bombardment of stimuli, handles experiences that require prolonged emotional investment. Red Dead Redemption 2 does not hand you everything on a platter in the first 30 minutes. It makes you work for the reward, presenting mechanics gradually, building relationships slowly, and allowing you to discover the world's secrets at your own pace. For some, this is liberating and represents the essence of a true immersive experience. For others, it seems like a waste of time when they could be playing something more direct and objective. The question is not whether the game is good or bad, but if you are willing to give the time and attention it demands to reveal all its greatness, something that goes against the conditioning that social media and fast content have created in many people. In the end, Red Dead Redemption 2 is a work that rewards those who choose to embrace its pace instead of fighting against it. When you accept that you don't need to rush to complete missions, that you can set up camp when night falls, that it's worth stopping to help or rob strangers on the way, and that conversations around the campfire are as important as the shootouts, the game transforms into something unique. Is an experience that demands emotional maturity and mental availability characteristics that are unfortunately becoming increasingly rare in a world dominated by instant dopamine and disposable content. If you can turn off notifications, ignore the infinite feed, and completely surrender to that world for a few hours, you will discover why so many consider this the best game ever created. But if you cannot make that sacrifice, you will probably abandon it before reaching the third chapter, thinking it is just a beautiful and boring game. The setting of Red Dead Redemption 2 is not just a beautiful backdrop for missions to happen, but rather the true silent protagonist of the experience. Rockstar built a universe where every everyday detail was meticulously thought out to create a sense of authenticity that transcends what we normally expect from an electronic game, transforming simple day-to-day actions into moments of contemplation that demand a completely different mindset from the one that dominates current digital culture. This design philosophy puts Red Dead 2 on a collision course with the consumption habits of Generation Z, accustomed to instant gratification and constant stimuli that characterize platforms like TikTok and Instagram. The level of detail that Rockstar invested in the everyday actions of Red Dead Redemption 2 borders on the obsessive in a way that we rarely see in the industry. When you hunt an animal, it is not simply aiming and shooting. You need to track footprints, consider the wind direction so your prey doesn't smell you, shoot in the correct spot so as not to ruin the hide, carry the carcass to your horse, getting your clothes stained with blood in the process, and then sell or use the materials appropriately. NPCs in the towns do not stand still repeating generic animations. They actually eat. You see the food being cut and diminishing on the plate. Work on constructions carrying specific materials. Play cards in bars following real rules, and maintain daily routines that change depending on the location and time of day. This commitment to realism transforms even the most mundane tasks into complex systems that demand attention and patience, something completely opposite to the instant simplicity that dominates the mobile and casual games that Generation Z consumes massively. One of the game's most ambitious mechanics is the Van der Linde gang camp, where each member has a complete routine that reflects their personality and role within the group. You can find Dutch reading philosophy in the morning, Pearson preparing dinner late in the afternoon, Mary Beth writing in her diary, and all these moments happen naturally, without the game forcing you to pay attention to them. The system allows you to choose to interact with these people, listen to their stories, participate in conversations around the campfire, or simply ignore everything and proceed to the next mission. But those who choose the second option lose fundamental layers of character development and immersion. This type of environmental narrative design requires the player to be willing to slow down and observe, investing time in moments that do not advance objectives or offer immediate material rewards, a proposal that goes directly against the rapid dopamine conditioning that social media applications have created in younger generations. Generation Z grew up in a digital environment where 15 to 60-second content dominates attention. Algorithms are programmed to deliver constant gratification, and the idea of waiting for anything seems antiquated. Research shows that this generation tends to have more balanced and fragmented gaming sessions, quickly switching between different activities, while previous generations can maintain long, uninterrupted gaming sessions more easily. The problem is not that Generation Z does not play complex games or lacks the capacity to appreciate deep narratives, but rather that the digital environment in which they grew up conditioned their brains to expect constant stimuli and frequent rewards, making contemplative experiences like Red Dead 2 cognitively challenging. When you are accustomed to scrolling an infinite feed where every second brings something new, spending 5 minutes silently riding through the desert or waiting for your character to meticulously clean each weapon seems like a waste of time instead of an opportunity for immersion. Red Dead Redemption 2 represents a game design philosophy that prioritizes realism and immersion above convenience and speed. Your horse is not a vehicle that magically appears when you press a button. It is a companion that needs to be fed, brushed, and treated with care, and which can throw you off if you pass too close to a snake. You cannot carry 50 weapons at once. You need to choose your arsenal and leave the rest on your horse's back. You get dirty with mud, blood, and grime, and you need to take a bath regularly, because the odor affects how animals and people react to your presence. Each of these mechanics was designed to make you feel part of that world, but they all add layers of friction that go against modern game design focused on removing obstacles and accelerating progression. For Generation Z, accustomed to games that respect their time and offer fast travel systems, unlimited inventories, and simplified mechanics, these choices can seem archaic and frustrating instead of immersive and rewarding. Patience has become one of the scarcest resources in the digital age, especially among young people who grew up with unlimited access to on-demand entertainment. The ability to wait, observe, contemplate, and absorb experiences slowly is not something that social media platforms encourage. On the contrary, they actively work to destroy these habits in favor of addictive cycles of rapid consumption. Red Dead Redemption 2 asks for exactly the opposite: that you turn off notifications. Ignore your phone, forget the Instagram feed, and completely surrender to that world for hours on end, allowing everyday moments like preparing coffee at the camp or fishing in an isolated lake to become memorable experiences in themselves. The game was not made to be consumed in fragmented 30-minute sessions while you switch between other activities. It demands total commitment and a willingness to accept that not every moment needs to be electrifying or productive. This demand for mindfulness puts Red Dead 2 in direct conflict with the habits that define Generation Z, creating a barrier to entry that many are simply unwilling or unconditioned to cross. The detailed setting and everyday moments of Red Dead Redemption 2 offer something rare in the current landscape: an opportunity to slow down and relearn to appreciate experiences that do not constantly scream for your attention. The details are there for those who choose to look for them. The way the snow accumulates on clothes, how NPCs react differently depending on whether you are dirty or clean, how storms gradually form on the horizon and completely transform the world's atmosphere. But these details are not shoved in your face with tutorials and notifications. You need to be present, attentive, and willing to let the game reveal its layers at its own pace. For members of Generation Z who can break free from the conditioning of instantaneity and embrace this philosophy, Red Dead 2 can function almost as a digital meditation, a space where it is allowed and even encouraged to exist without rush and without constant goals. But for those who cannot make this mental transition, the game will remain only as that beautiful but boring title that everyone praises, but that you abandoned in the second chapter. In a world where TikTok dominates attention, Reels define trends, and most content is consumed in fragments of seconds, questioning whether slow and contemplative games still have space seems reasonable. The resounding success of Red Dead Redemption 2, which reached 77 million copies sold and became the fourth best-selling game in history, offers a strong answer. Yes, there is not only space, but a real and sustained demand for experiences that call for deceleration and contemplation. Recent research shows that the majority of players prefer single-player, narrative-focused experiences, even in an era dominated by service games with microtransactions and constant multiplayer content. This reality contradicts the popular narrative that all modern gamers have an attention deficit and only want instant gratification. There is a deep psychological reason for the continued success of contemplative games. They function as a refuge from the very frantic digital environment that dominates our lives. While we spend the whole day receiving notifications, switching between apps, answering instant messages, and consuming disposable content, games like Red Dead Redemption 2 offer the opposite. A space where you are encouraged to turn all that off and simply exist in that world without haste. Titles like Journey, Firewatch, Abzu, and Spiritfarer have built dedicated communities precisely because they fill an emotional need that accelerated entertainment cannot satisfy. It is not about choosing one over the other, but recognizing that both styles have their place and purpose. The problem arises when we try to apply the metrics of success of one to judge the value of the other. The discussion about the economic viability of contemplative single-player games frequently ignores concrete success data. Red Dead Redemption 2 generated more than $1.38 billion in profit in its launch year alone, tripling its production budget, and continues to sell consistently years later, reaching concurrent player records on Steam during promotions. The argument that narrative games are economically unviable usually comes from executives who prefer the constant microtransaction model of service games, but the numbers show that well-constructed, Focused experiences have sustainable commercial longevity. The difference lies in the nature of the return. Contemplative games generate revenue through direct sales and sustained word of mouth over the years, while service games rely on daily engagement and recurring spending that can quickly run out if the player loses interest. The fundamental error when discussing the games market is to assume that there is a single type of player with a single entertainment preference. Generation Z is not a homogeneous monolith of people with attention deficit. Within this generation, there are millions who seek deep experiences, who value complex narratives, and who are willing to invest time in richly detailed virtual worlds. The indie contemplative games market continues to grow, with titles like Unpacking, Stardew Valley, and others building loyal fan bases precisely because they offer something different from the constant noise. Studies show that the preference for single-player games with narrative emphasis is majoritarian among players of all ages, challenging the assumption that only older players appreciate slow experiences. What has changed is not the desire for these experiences, but how they need to compete for attention in a saturated entertainment environment. The biggest challenge for contemplative games is not the lack of audience, but how to reach that audience in an algorithm that favors viral and sensational content. Red Dead Redemption 2 had the luxury of massive marketing from Rockstar and the expectation built by the previous game. But smaller titles face the battle of being discovered on platforms where 30-second videos dominate. A game that requires 10 hours to reveal its true depth does not sell well in 2-minute trailers or quick Twitch streams. It depends on genuine recommendations, detailed reviews, and the kind of word-of-mouth marketing that takes time to build. This does not mean that the market does not exist, but that the path to this market is different and requires strategies that do not always align with the traditional metrics of success of the modern industry. Besides commercial viability, contemplative games represent something culturally important: the preservation of the human capacity to slow down and absorb complex experiences. When Red Dead Redemption 2 forces you to spend minutes meticulously cleaning each weapon or riding through empty landscapes, it is training cognitive abilities that the digital environment is actively destroying. Patience, sustained attention, appreciation of subtle details, and tolerance for moments without constant stimulus. Games like these function almost as digital meditation tools, creating spaces where it is socially acceptable and even encouraged to simply exist without producing, consuming, or performing. The fact that millions of players voluntarily choose to spend hundreds of hours in these worlds, returning years after launch, suggests that there is a deep hunger for this type of experience that conventional entertainment does not satisfy. The space for contemplative games is not only guaranteed, but may be expanding as more people recognize the negative effects of frantic content consumption. The games industry is discovering that it does not need to choose between profit and depth. Titles like Red Dead Redemption 2 prove that you can have both when you respect the audience's intelligence and invest in sustained quality. The growth of the indie market focused on relaxing and contemplative experiences shows that there is demand at all budget levels, from massive AAA games to small projects made by reduced teams. What we will see in the coming years is not the death of slow experiences, but an even greater diversification of the market where different types of games coexist, meeting different emotional and psychological needs. For every person who abandons Red Dead 2 in the second chapter because they cannot cope with the pace, there are 3 others who have finally found the type of experience they were desperately looking for amidst the digital chaos. When we talk about Red Dead Redemption 2 as interactive art, we are not using romantic exaggeration or fan hyperbole, but objectively recognizing the technical and artistic level that Rockstar achieved. The game's cinematic direction involved 2,200 days of filming with, on 200 actors, more than 500,000 lines of dialogue, and a facial capture system that used 60 to 70 cameras to register every nuance of the performances. The team's decision to redo all cutscenes with cinematic letterboxing at the end of development, even after years of work, shows the level of obsession with visual perfection that guided the project. The result is an experience that transcends the traditional definition of a video game and approaches an interactive cinematic work, where every frame could be a painting, worthy of a museum. The scene direction in Red Dead Redemption 2 uses cinema techniques that few games can replicate with the same mastery. Each cutscene is carefully framed with angles that create tension, intimacy, or grandeur depending on the narrative moment, using dramatic close-ups on the characters' faces to capture micro-expressions that communicate more than entire dialogues. The natural lighting of the scenes changes according to the time of day and weather conditions, creating unique atmospheres that reinforce the emotional tone. Conversations around the campfire, bathed in the orange light of the flames. Confrontations under storms with lightning briefly illuminating the tense faces, and moments of contemplative silence during foggy sunrises. Rockstar didn't just film scenes and insert them into the game. They created a cohesive visual language where every element, from camera positioning to color palette, works together to tell the story viscerally. Arthur Morgan is not simply the avatar you control, but one of the most complex and human characters ever created in the history of video games. The emotional depth that Roger Clark brought to the performance transformed what could be just another generic outlaw into someone with layers of contradictions, vulnerabilities, and a journey of redemption that resonates deeply with those who play. Critics compared his narrative arc to Shakespearean tragedies, with some identifying the 5 stages of grief reflected in the story's progression, while others highlighted how his moral failings evoke genuine sympathy instead of revulsion. The diary that Arthur keeps during the game functions as a window into his psyche, revealing intimate thoughts, existential doubts, and observations about the world that show a man much more introspective than his tough exterior suggests. This masculine vulnerability, portrayed honestly and without glamorization, is rare even in cinema, let alone in video games. Rockstar was heavily inspired by the 19th century American painting school, particularly artists like Frederick Edwin Church and Albert Bierstadt, who captured the sublime grandeur of American nature. The concept of sublime in 19th century art did not simply mean beautiful, but something that inspired terror and reverence simultaneously. The smallness of humanity before the vastness of nature, the terrifying beauty of a storm, the inevitable mortality reflected in eternal landscapes. This artistic philosophy permeates every frame of Red Dead 2, from the impossible sunsets over the plains to the snow-capped mountains that seem to swallow the sky. The paintings that appear within the game itself are not random creations, but real works by artists from the European Renaissance to American Romanticism, transforming the virtual world into a living art gallery where every house and saloon tells its own story through the pieces displayed. This level of artistic curation demonstrates that Rockstar was not just making a cowboy game, but creating an authentic portrait of an era through the lens of the art that defined it. What separates Red Dead Redemption 2 from other technically impressive games is the emotional authenticity of the interactions between characters. The motion capture and facial performances capture not just the obvious movements and expressions, but the micro details that communicate subtext. The almost imperceptible tremor in Arthur's hands at certain moments, the aversion of the gaze when someone touches on painful subjects, the tension in the shoulders during difficult conversations. The team filmed the scenes in segments without the actors knowing the complete arc of their characters, creating more genuine performances and authentic reactions to the plot's revelations. This approach resulted in moments where you can see characters processing emotions in real time, making difficult decisions with visible hesitation, and carrying the weight of their choices in ways that transcend expository dialogue. When Arthur has sincere conversations with other gang members, you are not watching pre-programmed animations, but genuine performances that rival the best of contemporary cinema. Red Dead Redemption 2 definitely proved that video games can be art in the highest sense of the word, not just technically impressive entertainment. The game is not content to tell a story. It explores deep themes about mortality, loyalty, the end of an era, the inherent violence of American civilization, and the search for redemption when time is running out. The way these themes are communicated, through meticulous cinematic direction, emotionally authentic performances, visual design inspired by classic works of art, and a narrative that respects the player's intelligence, elevates the experience beyond any discussion about games versus art. When you finish Arthur Morgan's journey, you don't just feel like you completed a game. You feel like you lived a transformative experience that will stay with you in the same way that a great film or book stays. It is this lasting impact, this capacity to make you reflect on life, death, and meaning long after the credits roll that truly defines a work of art. The cultural clash between Red Dead Redemption 2 and content consumption on social media is not just an aesthetic preference, but represents a fundamental conflict between opposing philosophies of cognitive engagement. While Red Dead 2 demands that you slow down, invest hours in emotional development, and accept moments without immediate gratification, platforms like TikTok and Instagram were algorithmically designed to do exactly the opposite. Keep you scrolling endlessly through 15 to 60-second content that delivers instant dopamine. The cultural clash between Red Dead Redemption 2 and content consumption on social media is not just an aesthetic preference, but represents a fundamental conflict between opposing philosophies of cognitive engagement. While Red Dead 2 demands that you slow down, invest hours in emotional development, and accept moments without immediate gratification, platforms like TikTok and Instagram were algorithmically designed to do exactly the opposite. Keep you scrolling endlessly through 15 to 60-second content that delivers instant dopamine. TikTok and Instagram are not simply neutral entertainment platforms. They are sophisticated machine learning systems designed specifically to maximize screen time through addictive cycles. The TikTok algorithm analyzes how long you spend on each video, when you stop watching, what you like and share, and then uses this data to create an infinitely personalized feed that becomes increasingly efficient at capturing your attention. Instagram works similarly, analyzing relationships and behaviors to deliver exactly the type of content that will make you scroll for a few more minutes. These platforms have transformed entertainment into behavioral science, using the same techniques that casinos use to keep players betting: variable rewards, immediate feedback cycles, and the illusion that the next content will be even better. Red Dead Redemption 2, on the other hand, forces you to wait, to invest time without guarantee of immediate emotional reward, and to accept moments of boredom as a natural part of the experience. The cultural clash between fast consumption and long experiences does not only affect entertainment, but is fundamentally transforming education and cognitive development. Teachers report that Generation Z students avoid books and prefer videos as a primary source of information, cannot maintain concentration during traditional classes, and develop anxiety when forced to complete tasks that require sustained attention for more than a few minutes. The myth of the multitasking student was deconstructed by research showing that constantly switching between digital devices harms concentration, information retention, and deep content comprehension. Studies indicate that, for the first time in history, children have a lower IQ than their parents. And although screen time is not the only culprit, it has a significant measurable effect on cognitive development. When we apply this reality to video games, it becomes clear why so many young players abandon Red Dead 2 early. It is not a lack of interest, but literally a neurologically conditioned inability to sustain attention without frequent rewards. There is a growing divide between players who grew up before the era of dominant social media and those who were born with smartphones in their hands. For older players, spending 100 hours in a single-player experience rich in detail is not only normal, but preferable. For many of Generation Z, this seems like an irrational investment of time that could be spent consuming dozens of different experiences. The difference is not in intellectual capacity or artistic appreciation, but in the fundamentally different neurological conditioning about what constitutes valid use of leisure time. While previous generations were conditioned to value depth and mastery of individual experiences, the digital generation was conditioned to value variety, constant novelty, and entertainment efficiency measured in stimuli per minute. Red Dead Redemption 2 does not fail to reach young players because it is poorly designed, but because it asks for something that goes against years of behavioral conditioning created by algorithmic feeds. The attempt to bring experiences like Red Dead Redemption 2 to mobile devices perfectly exposes this cultural incompatibility, even when technically possible to run the game on smartphones through streaming or emulation. The fundamental experience conflicts with typical mobile behavior. Short sessions, frequent interruptions by notifications, and the expectation of gameplay that can be paused instantly. Successful mobile games are designed for 3 to 5 minute sessions, with constant progression and frequent rewards, the exact opposite of the Red Dead 2 philosophy. There are no legitimate mobile versions of Red Dead Redemption, because the experience would be fundamentally destroyed by adapting to the expectations and behaviors of the mobile audience. The Red Dead 2-inspired games for mobile that exist are grotesquely simplified versions that maintain only the superficial Western aesthetic, removing all the depth and contemplation that define the original. This impossibility of adaptation reveals that the cultural clash is not about technological platform, but about irreconcilable consumption mentality. The most disturbing aspect of this cultural clash is that it does not represent neutral preferences, but measurable consequences on brain health and cognitive capacity. Switching social media for books, contemplative games, or other activities that demand sustained attention has documented benefits for memory development, concentration, and mental well-being. Red Dead Redemption 2 is not just a game that some prefer and others don't. It is a tool that literally trains cognitive skills that are being atrophied by modern media consumption. The question is not whether you like slow games or fast content, but whether you are aware of how your entertainment choices are physically remodeling your brain and your capabilities. In a world where algorithms were designed to exploit neurological vulnerabilities and maximize engagement at any cost, choosing experiences that demand patience and cognitive effort becomes almost an act of cultural resistance. The clash between Red Dead 2 and social media will not disappear, because it represents two fundamentally opposite views on what constitutes time well spent, one that values depth, contemplation, and lasting emotional transformation, the other that values variety, constant stimulation, and immediate gratification.
Come on, let's go. We can make it. Come on, Dutch. Come on! Ah!